Friday, 29th May, 2020. Just after sunrise, police units moved quietly through a quiet Uxbridge street. Inside one of the houses, what police found was only a tip of the iceberg, a network worth close to £1 billion. 18 months later, in December 2021, dock workers at Sheerness began unloading another refrigerated bananas shipment, the kind they'd handled hundreds of times before. But this time, something felt off. A single container was pulled aside, and what was found inside would lead detectives into one of the most sophisticated smuggling routes the UK had ever seen. And then came July 26th, 2023. Two vans leaving Newhaven Port in the early morning light. Just miles up the A26, police units waited in silence. When they moved, it was over in seconds. 3 different locations, but linked by the same machinery of organised crime. Encrypted messages, hidden compartments, and men who thought they'd built the perfect system. This is the story of how 3 major operations in London, Kent, and Sussex were taken apart by UK police and the National Crime Agency. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. Between 2017 and 2020, a criminal organisation operated across London and Greater Manchester on a scale that would later shock investigators. 12 men, connected through encrypted messaging systems, controlled a supply line that moved tons of Class A drugs through the UK's ports and distribution hubs. What tied them together wasn't a single warehouse or a branded business. It was EncroChat, network they believed was untraceable. At the centre sat Paul O'Brien, a 57-year-old from Uxbridge. He acted as the coordinator, negotiating directly with suppliers in Europe and overseeing the financial side of the operation. His messages showed discussions about multi-ton loads of cocaine, payment movements in euros, and coded language for consignments. Working beneath him was Lee Mortimer, 40, from Ruislip, described by police as the deputy organiser. Mortimer handled regional deliveries, cash drops, and the logistics of moving product through safe houses around West London. To the north, 36 years old, Jonathan Strogalos, based in Manchester, controlled the northern arm. He arranged importation routes, warehousing, and wholesale distribution. His messages linked him to Matthew Parsons, 38, who coordinated the transport and handled the schedules of import runs, including lorry movements from European ports. Paul Shaw, also 38, managed couriers and maintained contact with drivers at Harwich and other access points. The network's finances were managed through a separate layer. Marcus Elmer, 52, specialised in cash handling and cleaning operations, while Jonathan Whitley, 56, provided a laundering channel through vehicles, property, and fake companies. Anthony Sheehan, 37, acted as a lower-tier supplier within the London chain. European contacts were managed by Markin Jadash, 47, who arranged continental supply and oversaw the import of high-purity cocaine and heroin consignments into the UK. Liam Cherrett, 45, distributed shipments to regional buyers, while John Maguire, 65, and his son, Ross Maguire, 36, were responsible for street-level resale, the final link between the bulk imports and local dealers. Every conversation, payment instruction, and route adjustment passed through EncroChat, and when it fell, all of the empire collapsed instantly. We will talk about this in a few minutes. What appeared, from the outside, to be a series of unrelated operators was, in fact, a structured organisation, a supply chain built like a business. Every member had a role, every movement recorded in code, and every transaction hidden behind encryption. They believed it made them invisible, and it was the belief that would eventually destroy them. By early 2020, after the decryption of the EncroChat, analysts from the Metropolitan Police, National Crime Agency, and Essex Police suddenly had access to thousands of message threads that until then had been completely invisible. One name kept reappearing in the conversations between the London and Manchester cells: Thomas Maher. A convicted haulier, Maher had already been jailed in 2020 for using his transport business to move drugs and cash between the UK and mainland Europe. I have already covered that case, and if you want to watch that video, the link is in the description, or you can check this video on my videos. The overlap between his logistics network and that of Paul O'Brien's organisation was too precise to ignore. Another most active handle uncovered was ONEDIAMONDGEE that already linked to Paul O'Brien through prior surveillance. Cross-referencing those encrypted conversations with cell site data and financial records exposed the structure of his network and the scale of its operation. What we have already discussed. EncroChat records revealed that both groups were using the same vehicle types, ferry routes and drop-off points. Messages recovered from O'Brien's handle referenced joint shipments and cash transfers described in code as tickets, slang for loads or payments, being moved through Irish and Dutch ports. Dates and figures within those messages matched Maher's known movements, building a picture of a shared supply corridor operating across borders. The National Crime Agency traced several of O'Brien's communications to contacts in Ireland, while the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau were already investigating a related stream of Euro transactions. On the 6th of May 2020, Garda officers stopped a vehicle in Drogheda and seized €600,000 in cash. The serial numbers and timing of that seizure lined up exactly with EncroChat messages sent between O'Brien and his European counterparts the same week. Further analysis by the NCA and Gardaí mapped a consistent route used by the network. Consignments left the Netherlands, then crossed into the Republic of Ireland or directly to Essex and Harwich, then moved inland through Liverpool or the M6 corridor. Each leg of the journey was organised by a different cell to fragment responsibility, Maher's transport chain handling the continental leg, whereas O'Brien's group managing the import and distribution. Investigators believed this multi-route design was deliberate. It allowed the gang to reroute loads when seizures occurred, using legitimate freight companies as cover. Every movement left a digital trace on EncroChat, forming a cross-Europe blueprint of a network that spanned Ireland, the Netherlands and the UK. What emerged was proof that O'Brien's billion-pound enterprise didn't operate in isolation. It was part of a continental supply web already exposed by Maher's downfall, a web now unravelling from both ends. The first decisive move came on 29 May 2020, when the Metropolitan Police moved on O'Brien's Uxbridge home. The early morning raid was swift. Officers forced entry and found exactly what the EncroChat logs had predicted: drug ledgers, encrypted phones, and a large quantity of cash concealed behind a false wall. O'Brien was taken into custody on suspicion of conspiracy to import and supply Class A drugs. With O'Brien detained, attention shifted north. Investigators working with the National Crime Agency and Greater Manchester Police tracked the parallel cell led by Jonathan Strogulos. Over the following months, officers executed a series of coordinated warrants in Manchester and Essex, arresting couriers, distributors, and financial handlers linked to the wider conspiracy. In each search, the same patterns emerged: encrypted devices, coded documents, and references that matched O'Brien's seized materials word for word. As the arrests built momentum, forensic accountants began dissecting the group's finances. Property transfers, vehicle sales, and business accounts revealed how profits had been laundered through a web of apparently legitimate firms, logistics companies, construction outfits, and high-end car dealers. Inside one property, they recovered over 160 kilograms of cocaine, more than £1 million in cash, and a collection of high-value watches and vehicles believed to have been purchased through shell companies. Later that year, the NCA and Essex Police carried out a linked operation at Harwich Port, intercepting another container shipment. Hidden among legitimate goods were 138 kilograms of cocaine and 8 kilograms of heroin. By combining digital forensics, traditional surveillance, physical seizure, and financial investigation, Operation Venetic transformed from an intelligence exercise into a coordinated strike against one of Britain's most profitable criminal enterprises. What began as a decrypted line of text had now become a chain of evidence stretching from encrypted screens to seized cargo, proof that even the most carefully concealed network could be traced, mapped, and dismantled. By the end of 2020, the once coordinated organization was collapsing in stages. Its encrypted shield had failed, finances were under scrutiny, and its leadership was either behind bars or in hiding. The billion-pound network that had operated in silence for years was now unraveling in full view of the agencies it had spent so long trying to avoid. By 2022, when proceedings opened at Isleworth Crown Court, prosecutors described it as one of the largest drug conspiracies ever charged in the United Kingdom. Across a series of hearings between 2022 and 2024, 12 men stood trial for conspiracy to import and supply Class A drugs and for laundering the profits that followed. The Crown Prosecution Service laid out the complete picture of their operation as how the organisation had shifted around 8 tons of cocaine and heroin through British ports, with an estimated street value of more than £1 billion. Officers from the Metropolitan Police, National Crime Agency, Essex Police, and Garda Síochána presented a joint case showing how each regional arm of the network fitted together. After months of evidence, the sentences reflected the scale of what the court called a professional and calculated operation. Following sentencing, the National Crime Agency issued a statement declaring the network dismantled and praising the cooperation between UK and Irish investigators. For those who had worked on the case since 2020, it marked the end of a criminal enterprise built on encryption and greed, and proof that even the most secretive of organised crime groups could be exposed, decoded, and brought before the court. O'Brien received 21 years in prison. His deputy, Lee Mortimer, was jailed for 18. Marcus Elmer was given 15 years and 6 months, while Jonathan Whitley received 10 years. Anthony Sheehan was sentenced to 4 years and Marcin Jardash to 16. In the north, Jonathan Strogilos was handed 31 years, Matthew Parsons 29, and Paul Shaw received 17 years and 9 months. Liam Cherrett was jailed for 9 years and 2 months, John Maguire for 16 years and 11 months, and Ross Maguire for 7 years and 7 months. Together, their terms totaled almost 195 years behind bars. Between March and December 2021, a new import route began to draw the attention of organised crime investigators. At first glance, it appeared legitimate, shipments of bananas arriving from Costa Rica to the port of Sheerness in Kent. Each container carried the same markings, the same supplier information, and identical cold storage packaging. Nothing about them stood out. But within months, it became clear that one of the largest drug importations in British history was moving through those consignments undetected. The operation was controlled by a criminal network that used legitimate freight companies as cover. Inside the containers, blocks of cocaine were concealed among the banana crates, often in tightly wrapped packages sealed against condensation. Once the containers cleared the port, the gang would intercept them at quiet industrial estates before they reached their registered distributors. One of those locations was a yard in Longfield, where members of the group worked overnight to remove the drug-filled boxes. To hide the theft, they replaced the missing crates with supermarket-bought bananas, ensuring that when the shipment was checked later, the load appeared untouched. The concealment method worked for months. Consignments entered the UK openly, unloaded and delivered by the same drivers, their paperwork signed off as normal. But surveillance and intelligence gathered through Operation Venetic began linking several of these shipments to encrypted communications between Kent, Manchester, and London. The pattern suggested an organised system for importing and distributing multi-hundred-kilo quantities of cocaine. The breakthrough came when one of the containers was flagged for inspection. Border Force officers, working with Kent Police and the National Crime Agency, opened the crates and discovered more than hundreds and thousands of kilograms of high-purity cocaine hidden beneath layers of legitimate produce. What happened next will be discussed in a few minutes, but let's figure out the whole network first. Each member of the group had a clearly defined role. At the center was Danny Smith, a 32-year-old from Orpington. Smith was the coordinator of the Sheerness importations, the one who controlled when and where each load would be collected once it cleared the port. He oversaw the distribution planning, arranging for couriers and storage sites before the drugs even reached British soil. His EncroChat handle, identified as part of Operation Venetic, appeared repeatedly in the exchanges that discussed fruit or bananas, references to consignments arriving from Central America. Working alongside him was Rhys Jury, 36, from Sevenoaks, who acted as the logistics organizer. Jury handled the hire vans used to collect the altered banana crates and coordinated their movement to industrial units across Kent, Essex, and the Midlands. Further north, Amir Manucheri, 34, from Manchester, provided the supplier-side link. He managed the flow of product once it reached northern England. His EncroChat presence was later connected to transactions involving hundreds of thousands of pounds in cash transfers, evidence of how money moved just as efficiently as the drugs themselves. Two experienced distributors, Christian Lee, 50, from Sunderland, and Christopher Sharrock, 31, from Wigan, controlled the next stage of the network. Lee supervised deliveries across the northeast, while Sharrock acted as a port handler and loader, liaising with drivers who had direct access to the docks. Their activity was supported by Nicky Fusedale, 42, from Norton, Teesside, who managed one of the warehouse storage sites used to temporarily hold the shipments before redistribution. Handling the network's finances was Addison Curtis, 37, from Margate. He helped launder profits through a mix of personal and business accounts, moving cash through false invoices and shell entities. The group's encrypted communications, traced to handles like Tunes, Big Wheeler, and Rocket, revealed detailed instructions for moving loads across the UK. They maintained strict security rules: no names, no phone calls, no direct references to drugs. Every instruction was written in code, each message wiped after delivery. By the time the network was exposed, detectives had mapped dozens of journeys, leaving Sheerness and leading to warehouses in Longfield, Manchester, Sunderland, and Teesside. Each route, every handover, and each payment formed part of a single logistics chain, one designed to turn legitimate banana imports into a steady stream of cocaine shipments feeding every corner of the country. After the first seizure at the Longfield Industrial Yard, Kent Police and the National Crime Agency began the painstaking task of mapping how the shipments moved through Britain's distribution network. Their investigation, running across most of 2021, focused on a single question: how had more than a ton of cocaine entered the country in plain sight? Surveillance teams set up near the Longfield Yard, where the first container had been traced. From the roadside, officers watched as vans arrived late at night, often within hours of containers being cleared through customs at Sheerness. The same vehicles appeared repeatedly, each time collecting boxes, staying less than an hour, and leaving in convoy. When one of the hire vans was eventually intercepted, police discovered banana crate labels and packaging fragments in the back, the exact type used on legitimate Costa Rican shipments. Laboratory examination later confirmed that these labels matched the original container manifests, proving that the boxes had been tampered with after leaving the port. Inside the van, they also found residue from compressed wrapping tape identical to that used to seal cocaine blocks recovered from the Sheerness seizure. As the surveillance expanded, officers identified several key yards and storage units being used by the group. The final breakthrough came when detectives traced a series of EncroChat messages directly to the Sheerness network. Though the system had been compromised 3 years earlier under Operation Venetic, the data continued to yield results as analysts worked through the backlog of decrypted material. Within those conversations, investigators found coded exchanges that described the planning and movement of 30 to 100 kilogram transfers at a time, consignments hidden among banana shipments. Each message carried fragments of information. By late 2023, After months of coordination between the National Crime Agency, Kent Police, and several regional organised crime units, authorities moved to strike. In October 2023, simultaneous arrests were carried out across Kent, London, Cambridgeshire, Staffordshire, Manchester, Cleveland, and Northumbria. The raids were executed within hours of each other, targeting every known location tied to the EncroChat handles. Inside homes, warehouses, and rented storage units, officers seized encrypted phones, laptops, ledgers, and large sums of cash. The total potential street value of what they had smuggled ran into hundreds of millions of pounds. The coordinated arrests marked the collapse of one of Britain's most sophisticated smuggling routes. What began with a single intercepted container at Sheerness had unfolded into a full-scale national takedown, built on years of encrypted messages, quiet observation, and relentless forensic work. When the case reached Maidstone Crown Court on the 1st of October 2024, prosecutors described it as one of the most sophisticated drug importation conspiracies ever dismantled in Kent. With the overwhelming evidence, most of the defendants entered guilty pleas. At sentencing, Judge Catherine Brown described the conspiracy as a highly organised and professional importation network built on deception, greed, and the abuse of legitimate trade. Danny Smith, 32, was jailed for 16 years and 8 months. Rhys Jory, 36, received 13 years and 4 months for his role. Amir Manuchehri, 34, was sentenced to 13 years and 8 months. Christian Lee, 50, was given 19 years, while Christopher Sharrock, 31, received 18 years. Nicky Fusedale, 42, was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Addison Curtis, 37, received a 2-year suspended sentence. A 34-year-old man from Manchester, whose name has not been publicly released, was also convicted in connection with the conspiracy. His sentencing remains pending, with separate proceedings expected to take place at a later date. However, as of now, no further updates have been issued publicly regarding his. In total, the group received more than 90 years of imprisonment. While the Sheerness network was being dismantled, another smuggling chain was already in motion, this time through the quiet docks of New Haven. By the summer of 2023, Sussex Police and the National Crime Agency were tracking the movements of an organised crime group operating between Belgium, France, and the UK. Intelligence suggested that large-scale drug shipments were being moved through New Haven port, hidden inside commercial freight consignments arriving from mainland Europe. What appeared to be routine haulage runs were in reality a carefully coordinated operation moving cocaine and ketamine worth tens of millions of pounds. At the centre of the network was Charlotte Moore, a 32-year-old from Hull, who acted as the UK coordinator. She arranged the timing of shipments, the collection teams, and the vehicles that would meet the lorries after they cleared customs. Working alongside her was her partner, Stephen Norris, 36, who helped with logistics and communication. The pair had already drawn police attention earlier that year following an attempted importation in May 2023. In the spring of 2023, the conspiracy showed a pattern that stretched beyond Sussex and into continental Europe. In early May, Border Force officers at Calais Eurotunnel intercepted packages on a ferry route that, on the face of it, were routine freight. Forensic examination of those parcels, however, revealed 107 kilograms of cocaine, a discovery that immediately widened the investigation and added a continental dimension to what Polizei and the NCA were already watching. The lorry driver on that run was identified as Kirill Lapsu, a Belarusian national, and forensic work on the seized packages later recorded DNA traces that linked back towards Charlotte Moore and Stephen Norris, who had already drawn police interest. Mobile phone data placed Moore and Norris in Belgium in the weeks before the Calais interception, a location pattern that matched the movement of the intercepted loads. Investigators also recovered internet searches from Moore's phone that showed her using translation tools to render phrases such as "I'm looking for cardboard moving boxes" and queries about brown packing tape into French. Those searches were followed by purchases. CCTV and receipts show Moore buying large moving boxes from IKEA on the 3rd and 4th of May 2023, behavior that prosecutors later presented in court as clear preparations for packaging and onward transport. The Calais seizure did not end the group's activity. Instead, it appeared to prompt a change of tactics and a series of test runs. In June 2023, officers stopped a Citroën car at the port of Tyne and discovered a specially welded hidden compartment in its boot. Forensic swabs recovered traces of ketamine from that vehicle, and Border Force and NCA inquiries linked the stop back to the same organising network being monitored in Sussex. The car was confiscated and added to the mounting physical evidence of deliberate attempts to find and exploit the different routes into the UK. By late July 2023, after months of joint intelligence work, the National Crime Agency and Sussex Police's Serious Organised Crime Unit had their target in sight. Surveillance teams had tracked a Belarusian-registered lorry arriving at Newhaven Port from Dieppe. As the lorry cleared customs and moved inland, two smaller vans began shadowing it, a Ford Transit Connect, driven by Charlotte Moore, and a Vauxhall Combo, driven by Abdul Suhrabi, with Stephen Norris travelling as Moore's passenger. Detectives watched as the vehicles travelled from the docks to an industrial unit near Avis Way, Newhaven, where they stopped briefly. The lorry driver, Pavel Budzko, remained with the vehicle as the boxes were offloaded into the two vans. Moments later, both vans pulled out and joined the northbound route toward Maresfield. From a distance, surveillance teams followed, communicating the convoy's position to waiting tactical units. As the vehicles approached the A26 near Maresfield, just south of the Premier Inn at Uckfield, officers moved in. The stop was swift and controlled. Armed units blocked both directions of the carriageway, while SOCU detectives surrounded the vans. Inside Moore's Transit Connect and Suhrabi's Vauxhall Combo, they found 30 tightly sealed cardboard boxes. When the first box was opened, officers found what they had been waiting for: compressed packages of cocaine and ketamine, vacuum sealed and stacked beneath layers of cardboard. The total discovery was staggering: 600 to 32 kilograms of ketamine and 70 kilograms of cocaine, with a combined street value of approximately £24.5 million. The seizure was immediately confirmed as the largest drug recovery in Sussex's history. Moore, Norris and Suhrabi were arrested at the scene on suspicion of conspiracy to import Class A and B drugs, while Pavel Budzko managed to flee during the operation, leaving his lorry abandoned. For several weeks, he remained out of reach until 28 September 2023, when he attempted to re-enter the UK and was arrested by Border Force officers. The operation had exposed every link in the chain, from the continental suppliers to the UK distribution team, bringing an abrupt end to a smuggling network that had believed itself untouchable. The case reached its conclusion on 27th June 2024, when the defendants appeared before Lewes Crown Court, sitting at Hove. Over several days, the court heard the full story of the operation. The prosecution laid out the evidence gathered over a year of investigation. In their statements following the verdicts, Detective Constable Laura Pettit of Sussex Police's Serious Organised Crime Unit and Rachel Bramley, Operations Manager for the National Crime Agency, both described the case as a model of cross-agency collaboration. Pettit said the sentences reflected the extremely serious nature of the offences committed, while Bramley praised the collective effort that brought the group to justice. Both highlighted the wider consequences of such operations. Charlotte Moore, 32 from Hull, who the court identified as the key organiser, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Her partner, Stephen Norris, 36, also from Hull, received a sentence of 10 years. Pavel Budzko, 50, was jailed for 9 years for his role. Kirill Laptso, 42, was likewise sentenced to 9 years for his role. Abdul Suhrabi, 53, was acquitted after the jury accepted that there was no proof he had known the contents of his vehicle. In total, the conspiracy's sentences amounted to 41 years of imprisonment, bringing formal closure to a case that had begun with a single tip-off and ended with an international takedown. What do you think about the cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of UK Crime Documentaries.